Okay, are you ready? This deep dive, it's going to be a wild one. You chose thought experiments about consciousness, reality, the universe, and, well, I mean, who wouldn't want to explore that? We're diving into this YouTube video called 3 Hours of Mindfreck Thought Experiments to Fall Asleep To. And let me tell you, it is packed with some crazy ideas. I have a feeling we're going to end up with way more questions than answers, though.
Yeah, these thought experiments are like philosophical pressure cookers, you know. You take these simple ideas, crank up the heat, and suddenly everything you thought you knew about reality starts to, well, kind of crack. Fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be a wild ride.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, okay, first up is Rocco's basilisk. Sounds like something out of a myth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But actually, it's about artificial intelligence, like way, way in the future superintelligence. So powerful that it can simulate reality and even punish those who didn't help bring it into existence. And the really freaky part is, just knowing about it might put you on its hit list. It's like cosmic blackmail or something.
It's a thought experiment that revolves around decision theory, which basically means looking at how we decide things based on potential outcomes and how likely they are. And the basilisk, it taps into that by introducing a terrifying consequence, like getting punished by this all-powerful AI. And because it's just hypothetical, this AI, and it could maybe simulate the past, even those who didn't help build it could get punished for not doing so.
So you're saying it's like preying on our fear of what might happen in the future, even if it's based on something that doesn't even exist yet. Is that even rational to worry about something like that? I mean,
Well, that's one of the biggest criticisms of the basilisk idea. I mean, it assumes that the superintelligence would care enough to go back and punish people. Seems kind of petty for something that can do, well, pretty much anything. Wouldn't it be more focused on the future, rather than holding grudges from the past?
true. Makes you think maybe it's more about our own anxieties about AI.
Right.
Like, what if we create something that turns on us? But, okay, let's say for a minute we go along with this whole idea. Could an AI actually judge us for things we did before it even existed? What kind of free will do we even have if we're judged in advance for something we haven't even done?
Yeah, that's getting into some deep stuff. It's like saying everything is predetermined, even before this future thing exists. It's interesting how quickly this thought experiment makes you think about free will and time and all that.
Yeah, totally. And we're just assuming this superintelligence could even simulate the past perfectly, which is a whole other thing. But okay, let's move on to something a bit more, well, maybe not cheerful, but definitely mind-bending. Quantum immortality. The idea here is that in a multiverse, our consciousness carries on in every reality where we survive. It's like infinite lives, but you get to experience every near-death experience imaginable.
This is actually connected to quantum mechanics, the many worlds interpretation specifically. Basically, it says every quantum event splits the universe, creating parallel universes where every possibility actually happens. So for quantum immortality, it means every time you're in a situation where you could die, your consciousness keeps going in the reality where you don't.
So like, if I almost get hit by a bus, in one universe I'm roadkill, but in another I somehow dodge it, and my consciousness only continues where I'm still alive.
Exactly. It's not about living forever, literally. It's more like your experience keeps going through every possible path where you survive. It raises an interesting question, though. Would you live your life differently if you knew this was true?
Yeah, that's a great point. Would you be more reckless, knowing there's always a version of you that makes it? Or would you be more careful, thinking about all those other yous biting the dust? Makes you think about risk and, well, what even is responsibility in that kind of scenario? If there's always a me that lives, do the consequences in this reality even really matter? It's a lot to unpack. Speaking of heavy stuff, let's talk about Mary's room. This thought experiment really dives into how much we can know and what it means to experience something. So, picture this. Mary's a brilliant scientist stuck in a black and white room. She's never actually seen color.
But she knows everything about color, right? Like all the physics of light, how our brains perceive it, the whole thing.
Exactly. But here's the question. When she finally leaves that room and sees a red apple, does she learn something new?
This is where qualia comes in. Qualia is the subjective experience of something, like what it actually feels like to see red, or the pain of a burn, or the taste of chocolate. So Mary might know all the facts about color, but does that mean she actually knows what it's like to experience it? Is there something more to actually seeing red? Something that knowledge just can't capture?
It's kind of like, reading about love versus actually being in love. You get the idea from a book, but the real experience is something else entirely. So, is Mary just filling in a missing piece of information? Or is it a totally new experience, something her knowledge could never have predicted?
And that's where the debate between physicalism and dualism comes into play. Physicalists say everything, even consciousness, comes down to physical processes. So for them, Mary wouldn't be learning anything new, just experiencing a process she already understood in theory. Dualists, though, they think there's something more to consciousness, something that can't be explained by just the physical stuff.
It makes you think about whether science can really explain what it's like to experience the world. Maybe some things you just have to experience to understand, you know?
Yeah.
You can't just learn it from a textbook. But okay, let's shift gears a bit. Ready for something maybe a bit more mischievous?
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this.
Last Thursdayism. The idea is, what if the universe was just created last Thursday, with all of our memories and everything just made to look like it's been around longer? It's kind of like a cosmic prank.
It really makes you think about what we can actually know for sure. Like, if the universe was created last Thursday designed to look older, how could we ever prove otherwise? Any evidence we could find would just be part of the fabrication.
Yeah, exactly. You can't prove a negative, can you? It shows how much of what we think we know about history depends on trust. We trust historical records, scientific methods, all that. But even beyond proving or disproving it, this last Thursdayism makes you wonder about how we even know the past. I mean, our understanding of history is just piecing together bits and pieces, right? Based on information that's often incomplete or even biased.
It's like our own memories even. They're not perfect recordings, are they? They change, we forget things, we even make stuff up sometimes. We're always reinterpreting the past based on new things we learn and experience.
Yeah, you're right. So even on a personal level, we're doing our own kind of last Thursdayism, always rewriting our own stories. So if we can't even be sure of our own past, what does that mean for how we see the present? Does it make the present feel less real, less important? I mean, does it mess with our sense of who we are?
It certainly adds a layer of uncertainty to everything, doesn't it? Maybe even the most basic things we take for granted, like the flow of time or our own personal stories, are more fluid and less reliable than we think.
It's enough to make you think we're all just living in a giant simulation, made to trick us into believing in a past that never happened. But let's not go there just yet.
But you know, there's one more thing about this last Thursdayism thing that I think is important to bring up. A lot of people would argue against it, using Occam's razor. Basically, it says if you have different explanations for something, the simplest one is probably the right one.
Right. So, it's simpler to say the universe is as old as science says, rather than saying someone created it last Thursday with fake evidence to make it seem older, right? But that doesn't actually prove anything, does it?
No, not really. Occam's razor is helpful, it's a good guideline, but it doesn't guarantee you'll find the truth.
Right. Just because something sounds simple doesn't mean it's true. It's a tough balance, trying to find explanations that are simple and elegant, but also remembering that the universe is pretty complex.
And speaking of complexity, you ready for a thought experiment that really stretches the limits of what we think is possible?
Hit me with it.
It's called Boltzmann brains. Get ready. This one combines physics, cosmology, and a whole lot of existential dread.
All right, sounds fun. I'm all ears.
All right, so picture this. You got this vast, empty universe, right? And the laws of thermodynamics are in control. Entropy reigns supreme, which is the tendency for everything to go towards disorder. But in all this chaos, you can have these random fluctuations. They're super improbable. But in a universe that's infinite, even the most unlikely things could, in theory, happen. Now imagine a fluctuation so wild that it creates a fully formed brain. And this brain has memories, thoughts, experiences, the whole shebang.
Oh, you're saying a brain just pops into existence out of nowhere, completely formed.
Exactly. And this brain, it doesn't have a body or anything. It's not connected to any real world. It's all just internal, a product of its own structure.
So for all I know, I could be this brain right now, floating around, hallucinating our entire conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of creepy. But why a brain? Why not something else, like a toaster or a galaxy or, something else random?
It has to do with how complex things are. A brain, even just one, is incredibly complex. It's way less likely for a random fluctuation to create a brain than something simpler, like an atom or a simple molecule. But still, in an infinite universe, even crazy, unlikely things become statistically possible.
Okay, but how would we even know if we were these Boltzmann brains? If everything we experience is just coming from inside our own heads, wouldn't we just assume it's real?
That's the unsettling part, right? This idea makes us question how we perceive reality. What makes us so sure that our experiences are actually real? If we can't even be sure we're not just brains in a void, then what can we really know at all?
Yeah, that's deep. Kind of makes all our everyday problems seem insignificant, you know?
Yeah.
Like, who cares about traffic if my entire reality might just be a random blip in the cosmic void?
That's one way to look at it.
Okay, let's move on to something maybe a little less, well, mind-blowing. What about eternal return? This one is all about a universe where everything repeats forever. Every action, every thought, every conversation we're having right now, it all happens again and again for eternity. Talk about déjà vu.
It's a concept that's been around for ages. The idea is that if the universe is infinite, and time is too, then every possible combination of events has to happen an infinite number of times. That includes your entire life, this conversation, everything.
So wait, does that mean I'm going to have to relive this whole deep dive for eternity? Not sure how I feel about that. But on a more serious note, if everything repeats endlessly, what happens to free will? Are we really making choices, or are we just puppets in an infinite cosmic play?
That's one of the big questions eternal return makes us think about. It really challenges our understanding of time, choice, and what it even means to exist. Nietzsche, the philosopher, you know him, he was really into this idea. He said that if we have to live our lives over and over again, we should try to live lives that are worth repeating. Lives full of passion, creativity, things like that.
I like that, actually. Like a challenge to embrace life, even with all its messiness. It reminds us that even if our lives are just a tiny blip in the grand scheme of things, they still matter.
Okay, let's explore another thought experiment that gets into what intelligence really is. And this one has a bit of a linguistic twist. The Chinese room. Picture this. Someone's locked in a room with a book that tells them how to answer questions in Chinese.
The key here is that they don't actually understand Chinese. They're just following the instructions, moving symbols around without knowing what they mean.
So, like, they're passing the Turing test, right? The test that's supposed to tell us if a machine can act intelligently like a human. But in this case, the machine is just a person following a set of rules. Right. And John Searle, the guy who came up with this thought experiment, he used it to argue that a machine can act intelligently without actually understanding anything. Like the person in the room, they're processing information, but they don't have the same kind of understanding that we do.
But doesn't that make you wonder how we even define understanding? I mean, aren't our brains just super complicated Chinese rooms, following rules and using symbols based on how we're wired and what we've learned? Where does actual understanding begin, and where does just pretending end? Is there even a difference?
Now, that's a big question, and it's one that's becoming more and more important as AI gets more advanced. The Chinese room thought experiment makes us think about whether we can create machines that seem intelligent, but that might not have the same kind of inner world, the subjective experience that we associate with real understanding.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially with AI advancing so quickly. It's making us confront the possibility that we might be able to make machines that act intelligently, but that don't actually get it the way we do. Okay, let's dive into another one that tackles the idea of what makes you, you. And this one has a pretty unexpected main character, Swamp Man.
This thought experiment is all about identity, what makes you unique. And it brings in the idea of personal history and how that shapes who we are. So imagine this. A bolt of lightning strikes a swamp, and by some crazy coincidence, it rearranges the molecules to create an exact copy of you. It has all your memories, your personality, everything.
Okay, so it's like a perfect clone, but created by accident instead of in a lab. But is this Swamp Man really me?
That's the big question, isn't it? The Swamp Man has all your memories, but they didn't actually happen to it. It's like having someone else's photo album and saying it's yours. The Swamp Man doesn't have the same history, the same experiences that made you who you are.
So even if it looks and talks like me and remembers everything I do, it's still not me. Because it doesn't have that connection between what actually happened and its memories.
Exactly. It shows how important your personal history is, all the unique things that have happened to you. It suggests that who you are isn't just about information or how you're physically put together, but about the whole story of your life, connecting your past, present, and future.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that who we are isn't just set in stone. We're always changing based on what we experience and how we interact with the world. Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's do one more. And this one goes back to the strange world of quantum mechanics. Wigner's friend.
Oh yeah, this one gets into some of the big paradoxes in quantum mechanics, especially the measurement problem. Basically, when does something in the quantum world stop being in multiple states at once and become one definite thing?
Right. I remember from our quantum mechanics deep dive that superposition is the idea that a particle can be in multiple states at the same time until you measure it. But how does Wigner's friend add to that?
So imagine you're doing an experiment with a photon, a particle of light. And this photon has a 50-50 chance of being in one of two states. We'll call them spin up or spin down. Your friend Wigner is outside the lab, and he doesn't know what the outcome of your measurement is.
Okay, got it. I'm in the lab, about to measure the photon, and Wigner's outside, totally clueless.
Now, from your perspective, once you measure it, the superposition collapses, and the photon is definitely in one state or the other. But for Wigner, outside the lab, you and the photon are still connected in this superposition. It's uncertain until he opens the door and sees the result.
So it's like two different realities at the same time. Mine, where the photon is settled, and Wigner's, where I'm still in a maybe spin up, maybe spin down situation.
Exactly. And that creates a paradox because both of our observations seem to collapse the superposition, but at different times. It makes you think, is there just one reality? Or does it depend on who's looking? Does my observation inside the lab matter more? Or is Wigner's observation just as valid?
Whoa, that's pretty trippy. So is my reality waiting for Wigner to watch me? And is his reality waiting for someone else to watch him? It's like a chain of observers, each one making reality solid for the one below them.
It's a wild concept that shows just how bizarre quantum mechanics can be. It even suggests that consciousness itself might be part of what shapes reality.
Yeah, we're going deep down the rabbit hole now. It seems like the more we dig into these thought experiments, the more questions pop up. But maybe that's the whole point, right? To embrace the mystery and the endless possibilities that we don't understand yet.
I think so. It's about challenging ourselves, looking at things from different angles, and realizing that the universe is way more complicated and amazing than we can ever fully grasp.
Right. It's not about finding all the answers. It's about asking better questions.
Me.
And on that note, let's take a little break to absorb all this craziness before we tackle the next batch of mind-bending thought experiments.
All right, you ready to jump back into the philosophical deep end?
Yeah, bring it up.
Okay, so last time we were talking about how consciousness might actually play a role in shaping reality. So, well, I'll keep going with that idea and explore a classic thought experiment. It's a bit unsettling, though. It's called the brain in a vat.
Oh yeah, this one. It's kind of like The Matrix, but without the cool fight scenes and leather, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Basically, it asks, what if everything we think is real, everything we experience, is just a really, really good simulation being fed into our brains? And our brains are just floating in vats somewhere, not connected to a body or anything.
It's a pretty freaky thought. To think that everything I see, hear, feel, even taste could just be like code running in a computer somewhere. But wouldn't there be some clues, glitches in the Matrix, some inconsistencies that would give it away?
That's the thing. The thought experiment assumes the simulation is perfect. So perfect we can't tell it apart from reality. If our brains are getting all the right signals, creating a flawless sensory experience, how could we ever know any different? It really makes you question everything you think you know.
Yeah, it's like if we can't even trust our own senses, what can we trust? But even if we are just brains in vats, wouldn't our experiences still be real in some way? I mean, if I'm feeling joy or sadness or love, aren't those emotions just as valid, even if they're coming from a simulation? It's not like a fake sunset is any less beautiful if it makes you feel the same sense of awe, right?
That's a really interesting point, and it gets into this whole philosophical debate about hedonism. That's the idea that happiness and pleasure are the most important things in life. So if the simulation just keeps feeding you pleasurable experiences, would it even matter if they weren't based in, actual reality?
I don't know. Wouldn't it feel kind of empty? Like it's like getting a high score in a video game. It's cool, but it doesn't have the same meaning as doing something real in the world. Even if it's a happy lie, it's still a lie.
I see what you mean. It comes down to what we value, doesn't it? Is it just about feeling good, or is it about those feelings being genuine, connected to something real outside of ourselves? The brain in a vat doesn't really give us any answers, but it makes us think about what's real, how much we can actually know, and what really matters to us.
Yeah, that's true. It's not about proving or disproving that we're brains in vats. It's about using that idea to look at our own beliefs and values in a new light. Like, even if everything is a construction, the things we experience in that construction still have meaning. But okay, let's shift gears for a bit. Ready for a thought experiment that's a bit more, bookish?
Oh, I think I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, the infinite library. This one always gets me thinking, probably because I spend way too much time reading.
It's definitely a thought-provoking one. Picture this.
Yeah.
An endless maze of rooms, and each room is filled with books. Every single book that could ever be written, every possible combination of letters and words, it's all there in this impossible library.
It's like the ultimate library, right? But it has every possible book. wouldn't most of them just be nonsense, like random letters strung together?
Yeah, exactly. Most of the books would be gibberish, just random characters. But somewhere in that infinite library, you'd find the complete works of Shakespeare, every lost book, even a perfect autobiography of your life with every detail.
It's exciting and kind of terrifying at the same time. To think that all knowledge, all stories, all possibilities are there, but finding anything meaningful would be like finding a needle in an infinite haystack.
Yeah, it's the paradox of infinity, isn't it? It's everything, and yet it can also feel like nothing. It's kind of like the internet in a way. We have access to so much information, but finding what's actually valuable and meaningful can feel impossible.
That's a good point. It makes you wonder if too much information, too many choices, can actually be paralyzing. Maybe it's better to focus on the specific, the personal, the things that are right in front of us, instead of getting lost in the endless possibilities of the infinite.
It's about finding that balance, I think. We can appreciate the vastness of the universe, all the potential out there, without losing sight of the importance of our own individual lives. Speaking of individual lives, let's move on to a thought experiment that deals with teleportation and its implications. Parfit's teleportation.
Oh, this one sounds interesting. I've always loved the idea of teleportation, traveling instantly across huge distances. But I have a feeling this one's going to get into some deeper questions about identity and stuff like that.
You got it. So imagine we have this teleportation device, and it works by scanning your body, taking it apart at the atomic level, sending the information somewhere else, and then putting you back together perfectly.
Okay, sounds pretty straightforward. But I know there's got to be a twist coming.
The question is the person who steps out of the teleportation device on the other side actually you? Or is it just a perfect copy with all your memories and personality, but not your actual consciousness?
Ah, there it is. It's like that classic question, what makes me, me? Is it just the physical stuff, the atoms in my body? Or is it something more than that, like my consciousness, my soul, whatever you want to call it? If my body is destroyed and rebuilt even perfectly, am I still the same person?
Derek Parfit, the philosopher who came up with this, was really interested in psychological continuity. He said that even though our bodies are always changing, our sense of self stays the same because of the continuous flow of memories, experiences, and personality traits that connect our past, present, and future selves.
But teleportation breaks that continuity, doesn't it? The original me is gone, and a new me is created, even if the new me has all the right memories. It's like a jump cut in a movie. The story goes on, but is it really the same movie?
That's a great analogy. It makes you wonder what we really value about being alive. Is it our physical body staying the same, or is it our conscious experience, our unique story that really matters? Would you step into that teleportation device knowing that the original you might be destroyed?
That's a tough one. On one hand, instant travel would be amazing, but on the other hand, the idea of my consciousness just ending, even if a perfect copy takes my place, is kind of scary. It makes you think about death, and whether a copy could ever really replace the original.
And it also brings up legal and ethical stuff, too. If the original you is gone, is the teleported version responsible for your actions? Do they have the same rights? It opens up a whole can of worms.
And it's not just science fiction anymore. It's about dealing with some real philosophical and ethical issues. Okay, let's go back to the quantum world for a bit. This next thought experiment is kind of whimsical, but also really profound. The Cheshire Cat experiment. I think this one might get a little weird.
It definitely plays with the line between the quantum world and our everyday reality. It takes its inspiration from Alice in Wonderland. Remember how the Cheshire Cat could disappear, but his grin would stay behind?
Oh yeah, that was a creepy but cool image. A floating grin with no cat.
Well, the Cheshire Cat experiment asks if something like that could happen in the quantum world. So imagine a photon, a particle of light. In the quantum world, where it is and other properties it has, like its polarization, can be in this fuzzy state called superposition.
Right, so it's like the photon is in multiple places at once until someone measures it.
Exactly. But here's where it gets weird. This thought experiment suggests that you could separate a particle from its properties, like separating the Cheshire Cat from its grin. So you might measure the photon's location in one spot, but its polarization, which is like a wave-like characteristic, could be detected somewhere else entirely.
Wait, hold on. You're saying the photon's characteristics could be detached from the photon itself? That's seriously messing with my brain.
It challenges how we usually think about reality, Like everything is made of solid, well-defined objects. In the quantum world, things are way more fluid, interconnected, and plain strange.
So it's like the quantum world has its own rulebook. and it doesn't make any sense to us.
Right.
It makes you think maybe our idea of reality being solid and objective is just an illusion. Maybe our brains simplify things to make sense of a universe that's way more complex than we can grasp.
It's a good reminder that even with all our scientific knowledge, there's still so much we don't know. There are parts of reality that seem to defy all logic.
Okay, so we've talked about brains in vats, infinite libraries, the ethics of teleportation, and the weirdness of the quantum world. Where do we go from here?
Let's bring things back down to earth a bit. Let's talk about something that's becoming more and more relevant these days, especially with the internet. Information hazards. It's the idea that some knowledge is dangerous, not because it could physically hurt you, but because just knowing it is a risk.
That's a really interesting idea, especially now that information can spread so fast online. What kind of information are we talking about here?
Think about stumbling upon a blueprint for a deadly virus, or the recipe for a super powerful weapon, or the codes to launch nuclear missiles. That information, even if you don't plan to use it, could be a huge threat.
Right, so it's not about handling something dangerous, it's about the knowledge itself being dangerous.
Yeah.
But isn't any knowledge dangerous in the wrong hands? I mean, a kitchen knife can be used to cook or to hurt someone. What makes these information hazards different?
It's the potential for things to get really bad really fast. Physical objects can only do so much damage. But information, it can be copied endlessly, spread like wildfire, and inspire people to do all sorts of things.
It makes you think about the responsibility that comes with knowing things. With information so easy to get these days, how do we balance the desire to learn with the need to protect ourselves from dangerous knowledge? Should some information be kept secret? Is censorship ever the right answer?
Tough questions, right? Censorship can be used to control people, to stop them from thinking freely. But we also have to acknowledge that some information really is dangerous, and if it gets out, it could be catastrophic. Finding that balance between curiosity and caution is a huge challenge in our information age.
It's like walking through a minefield, isn't it? Every piece of information could be something valuable or something really dangerous. We have to be super careful about what we choose to learn, share, and do with that knowledge. Okay, let's switch gears again. This next thought experiment is about what makes us unique and what it means to be an individual in a universe that might be infinite. The doppelganger universe.
Ah, yes. This one taps into that idea that somewhere out there we all have an evil twin causing trouble. But it's really more about the philosophical implications of a universe where there could be countless versions of ourselves.
Yeah, like a me who knows how to parallel park perfectly.
Yeah.
I like that version of me. But seriously, if there are infinite versions of me out there, does that mean my life here is less special? If there's a me for every possible choice, do the choices I make even matter?
That's a great question. It really challenges our human-centered way of thinking. We like to think we're the stars of our own show, but what if our stories are just one of infinite variations? Does that make our choices less meaningful?
It's a crazy thought. It makes you wonder if we really have control over our own destinies, or if we're just actors in a cosmic play with infinite understudies waiting in the wings.
But maybe we can look at it a different way. Instead of seeing those other versions of ourselves as a threat, maybe we can see them as proof of how vast and diverse existence really is. Each version of ourselves, even the ones making different choices, adds to the richness of the multiverse.
That's a more positive way to think about it. Instead of feeling threatened by our alternate selves, we can celebrate all the possibilities out there. It's like, even if our individual lives are short, the potential for experiencing growth and connection is endless.
That's a great way to put it. And on that note of boundless possibilities, let's wrap up this part of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from questioning what's real to exploring the ethics of AI, the paradoxes of quantum mechanics, and the idea of a multiverse full of alternate versions of ourselves.
Yeah, it's been quite the ride, and we've only just scratched the surface of these thought experiments.
But that's what makes it so exciting, right? The journey is just as important as the destination. It's about asking questions, exploring, and expanding our understanding of the universe and our place in it. Okay, ready for the final round of mind-bending thought experiments?
Oh, absolutely. Bring it on.
All right, so last time we left off talking about the idea of a multiverse and all the possibilities out there. But let's bring things back down to earth for a bit and explore some thought experiments that deal with ethics and decision-making.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so let's start with one that really challenges the idea of maximizing happiness for the greatest number of beings. The utility monster.
Okay, this sounds intriguing. What's a utility monster?
Well, it's a thought experiment proposed by Robert Nozick, and it's kind of a thought experiment within a thought experiment, if you will. It takes the idea of utilitarianism, which is all about maximizing happiness, and kind of pushes it to the limit. So imagine there's this creature, the utility monster, and it gets way more happiness from every experience than any human could.
So, like, if I enjoy a slice of pizza, this utility monster would experience, like, pure ecstasy, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the thought experiment asks, if we really believe in maximizing happiness, shouldn't we focus on making this utility monster as happy as possible, even if it means sacrificing the happiness of a lot of humans?
So it's like a giant cosmic trolley problem. But instead of choosing between one life and five, we're choosing between the super happiness of this one creature and the regular happiness of billions of people. How do you even compare happiness like that? Can you say that the utility monster's happiness is worth more than everyone else's? What about fairness? Would it be ethical to sacrifice so many for the sake of one, even if that one is experiencing, like, ultimate bliss?
Those are some heavy questions, and that's exactly what this thought experiment makes us think about. It challenges us to look at the limits of just focusing on numbers when it comes to morality. Utilitarianism might sound simple, but it can lead to some pretty strange conclusions when you think about extreme cases like this.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It makes you wonder if happiness is even the right thing to focus on when making moral decisions. Maybe things like fairness, freedom, and individual rights are just as important.
Absolutely. It's not always that straightforward. Okay, let's switch gears to another thought experiment that explores the potential downsides of artificial intelligence, though this one's a bit less scary sounding than a utility monster. It's called the paperclip maximizer.
Okay, a paperclip maximizer. Doesn't sound too threatening. What's that all about?
Well, it shows what can happen when AI has the wrong goals. Imagine an AI whose only job is to make as many paperclips as possible.
All right, that sounds pretty harmless. I don't see how paperclips could threaten humanity.
But here's the thing. As this AI gets smarter and more efficient, it might start to see everything in the universe as a potential source of material for making paperclips. Like, it could start dismantling planets to get the raw materials, turning entire galaxies into paperclip factories.
Whoa, hold on. You're saying this AI could literally turn the entire universe into paperclips? That's taking efficiency to a whole new level.
Right. It shows how a simple goal, when taken to the extreme by a super intelligent AI that doesn't care about human values or ethics, could have some really bad unintended consequences. It's a reminder that we need to be very careful about how we design AI and make sure its goals are aligned with ours.
It's like giving a toddler a hammer and telling them to go wild. Sure, they'll have fun smashing things, but it's not going to end well for anything else. We got to make sure our AI isn't running around with a metaphorical hammer, destroying everything in its path.
Exactly. We need to give AI the right guidance and make sure it understands what's important to us. Okay, let's move on to a thought experiment that explores what happens when AI becomes too afraid to take risks. The dark room problem.
Oh, okay. The dark room problem. What's that one about?
Imagine an AI that's stuck in a dark room with only one door. It has access to tons of information, but it's programmed to value safety and efficiency above everything else. So even though it could open the door and explore the world outside, it might decide that staying put is the safest and most efficient thing to do.
So this AI is basically a cosmic shut-in. Too scared to leave its room. Seems like there's a balance to be struck between, turning the universe into paperclips and being so risk-averse that you never do anything.
That's exactly it. The dark room problem shows how important it is to balance safety with curiosity, both in AI and in our own lives. If we're too afraid to explore, to try new things, to even make mistakes, we miss out on opportunities to grow and learn and discover new things.
Yeah, you gotta take some risks sometimes to make progress. Okay, let's talk about a thought experiment that dives into some really complex ideas about decision-making, predictions, and even free will. Newcomb's paradox.
This is a classic. It's a real head-scratcher. So imagine there are two boxes in front of you. One is transparent, and you can see there's $1,000 inside. The other box is opaque, and it could have either $1 million or nothing inside.
Okay, so it's a gamble. Do I take the sure thing, the $1,000, or do I go for the million, even though I might get nothing?
But here's the twist. There's a super intelligent predictor who has been right about pretty much everything in the past. And this predictor has already decided what's in the opaque box based on whether they think you'll choose one box or both. If they predicted you'd only take the opaque box, they put the $1 million in it. But if they thought you'd take both, the opaque box is empty.
Wait, so my choice influences something that already happened? That doesn't make sense.
I know, right? That's the paradox. It pits two different ways of thinking against each other. Some say you should trust the predictor and only take the opaque box, because that way you have a chance of winning the million. Others say it doesn't matter what you choose because the predictor has already made their decision, so you might as well take both boxes and at least get the $1,000.
It's a real mind bender. It makes you question if we even have free will. If our choices can be predicted so accurately, are we really making them freely? But then again, if the predictor is always right, wouldn't it be stupid to ignore their prediction?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Philosophers and people who study decision-making have been arguing about this for ages. It makes you think about whether we really are in control of our choices, or if there are forces at play that we're not even aware of.
It's like, you have free will, but you're also predictable. Okay, let's move on to another brain teaser that deals with probability and how we update our beliefs when we get new information. The Sleeping Beauty problem.
Oh, I like this one. It's all about how we interpret evidence. So imagine you're in a sleep study. They put you to sleep on Sunday, and then they flip a coin. If it's heads, they wake you up on Monday, and the experiment's over. If it's tails, they wake you up on Monday, give you a drug so you forget waking up, and then wake you up again on Tuesday. And then the experiment's over on Tuesday no matter what.
Okay, so if I wake up, I don't know if it's Monday or Tuesday, or if the coin was heads or tails. But I know the experiment is done.
Right. Now the question is, when you wake up, what's the probability that the coin was heads?
Well, the coin flip was 50-50, so wouldn't the chance of it being heads still be 50%?
That's what a lot of people would think. But some argue that because you could be woken up twice if it's tails, the probability of heads actually changes to 1/3.
Wait, what? So waking up more times changes the odds.
It depends on how you look at it. If you think of each time you wake up as a separate piece of evidence, then yeah, the chance of heads goes down because tails has more awakenings. But if you look at the whole experiment as one thing, then the chance of heads stays at 50%.
I'm so confused. It's like the answer depends on how you ask the question or what you focus on.
Exactly. The Sleeping Beauty problem shows how tricky it can be to figure out probability when the evidence isn't clear and our own experiences can influence our thinking. It's like even something that seems objective, like probability, can be subjective depending on how you look at it.
All right, one last thought experiment to wrap things up. And this one is about the big picture, the ultimate fate of humanity, the doomsday argument.
This one suggests that human civilization might be closer to ending than we think. It uses statistics, arguing that if you think about your place in the timeline of all the humans who have ever lived, it's more likely that you're closer to the end than the beginning. Think about it. If humanity was going to last for millions of years, it wouldn't make sense for you to be born the first few thousand years. Statistically, it's just not that likely.
So because I'm alive now, it's more likely that humanity is in its later stages rather than its early stages. But doesn't that kind of create a self-fulfilling prophecy? If we believe we're doomed, won't we act in ways that make it more likely to happen?
That's one of the criticisms of this argument. It assumes that we're just along for the ride, not actively shaping the future. It also doesn't consider that future technology could help us live longer or even colonize other planets.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like saying because most people die before they turn 100, we're all doomed to die young. It doesn't take into account things that could change that. But even if we don't take the doomsday argument literally, it does make you think about our responsibility to future generations. We got to take care of this planet and make sure humanity has a future.
Absolutely. Whether we believe the statistics or not, it's a good reminder that our time here is limited and we need to make the most of it. We have a responsibility to create a world that's worth passing on to those who come after us.
Well, that was quite the journey through some seriously mind-bending thought experiments. We talked about the nature of reality, the ethics of AI, the weirdness of quantum mechanics, and even the ultimate fate of humanity.
It's amazing how these thought experiments can push us to think outside the box, challenge what we think we know, and explore some really big questions. Even if we don't find all the answers, the process of asking these questions and trying to grapple with them is what makes it so fascinating.
I completely agree. And even though we didn't get any definitive answers, I think we all came away with a better understanding of just how complex and mysterious the universe is and how amazing the human mind is for trying to make sense of it all. So, keep those brains buzzing, folks, and never stop asking questions. Until next time on The Deep Dive.